I'm Avery Cole, and this story isn't about money. It's about what money reveals. I live in a modest red brick townhouse in Columbus, Ohio, with ivy climbing the back wall and a maple tree that turns gold every fall. From the outside, it looks peaceful, like stability was always part of the design. What no one sees is that for the past 18 months, I've been quietly funding the life my parents pretend they can still afford. Their home, a white colonial on Pine Ridge Drive in Cleveland, is the kind of house that looks better in snow. Black shutters, wraparound porch, tall windows that used to glow with family warmth when I was a kid. Now it just stands there, beautiful, aging, and expensive. Every month, I sent $3,000 to keep it alive. That meant the mortgage top-up, winter heating oil, the repair fund for the leaking roof, and my mother's tendency to rack up late fees because she forgot to check the mail. I kept track of it all in a color-coded spreadsheet. Green for paid, yellow for due, red for danger. My laptop became the real caretaker of that house. The irony still stings. I was the daughter my father called ungrateful, yet without me, his house would have gone dark last winter. I told myself I was doing the right thing. Love, I thought, is practical. It's not gifts or praise, it's keeping the lights on. My parents had raised me through hard times, and even if their affection came with conditions, I still felt responsible. Maybe it was guilt, or habit, or that endless hope children carry that one day, if they're good enough, they'll finally be seen. There was another reason too, my sister Lila, the perfect daughter. She was the one who got the hugs, the praise, the soft tone my father never used with me. She was the family's golden narrative, kind, successful, selfless. Except none of that was entirely true. Behind her charity posts and family-first quotes, she'd been sending me messages at midnight. The credit card declined again. Mom needs her medication. Can you cover the electric bill? I always said yes. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. But I started noticing how the narrative outside our group chat stayed the same. Dad thanking Lila for keeping the house afloat, Mom calling her our backbone. At first, I didn't correct them. Then I told myself the truth didn't matter as long as they were okay. But it does. Silence feeds the wrong story until it becomes the only one people believe. By the time December came, I'd sent $54,000. I could have bought a brand new Tesla or made a down payment on my own home. Instead, I'd bought peace, or so I thought. I wrapped their gifts carefully. A plaid scarf for Mom, a leather wallet for Dad, and monogrammed towels for Lila and her boyfriend, Grant. I didn't plan to expose anyone. I just wanted to tell them, gently, that it was time for them to take over the payments. I would give them 3 months' notice, no drama, no resentment. The week before Christmas, I checked my accounts again. $3,000 scheduled for the 22nd, one day before the party. I thought about canceling it early but decided to let it go through. I didn't want to ruin the holidays. I wanted to walk into that house as a daughter, not a creditor. The morning of the party, the snow came down in thick sheets, coating the roads like icing sugar. I loaded my car with gifts and a bottle of wine, even though I knew my father would mock me for showing off city taste. As I drove north, every mile brought back something. My mother humming while she cooked, my father lecturing me about responsibility, Lila practicing her piano piece for school recitals while I did the dishes. When I pulled into their driveway, the porch light flickered weakly. The house looked tired but proud, like it refused to admit how close it was to falling apart. Inside, laughter rolled from the living room. Neighbors, old friends, and people my father called business associates, though he hadn't worked in years. My mother greeted me with that polished smile she reserved for public appearances, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You made it," she said, taking my coat before I could answer. Her perfume filled the hallway, sweet and artificial, just like the small compliments she gave me when guests were near. Dad stood by the punch bowl, red-cheeked and loud. When he spotted me, he raised his glass but didn't smile. Lila, in her perfect crimson dress, floated around him, whispering to guests and handing out cookies like she owned the house. Maybe in his mind, she did. I helped Mom carry another tray to the table, my fingers brushing against a stack of unpaid bills half hidden under a pile of napkins. My chest tightened, but I said nothing. This was supposed to be the night we were a family again. Later, when the party was in full swing, I tried to catch my father for a private word, but every time I got close, someone interrupted. Finally, as he turned toward me, something in his face shifted, resentment, or maybe guilt disguised as anger. And for the first time, a small voice inside me whispered that maybe he already knew it wasn't Lila sending the money. Maybe pretending it was her let him keep his world intact. The good daughter, the perfect order, the one who never needed saving. I told myself I'd wait until morning to talk. Tonight, I would be polite. I would smile through it all, even if the laughter in that house had long stopped sounding like love. When I left around midnight, the snow had stopped. The air was sharp and cold, and the streetlight cast a soft glow on the white lawn. I stood there for a moment, staring at the house I had been paying to preserve, realizing it wasn't mine, not anymore. It belonged to their illusion, not my effort. I didn't know then how the next few days would unfold, or that the truth would soon shatter everything they'd built on lies. I only knew that something inside me was changing, something strong and final, like ice settling into place before it cracks. That night, driving back to Columbus, I promised myself that if love ever asked me to erase myself again, I'd say no. I just didn't know how soon I'd have to prove it. The day of the Christmas party felt like one long test I didn't know I'd agreed to take. I left Columbus early that morning, the roads already dusted with snow, the sky a pale gray sheet that promised more. The highway shimmered faintly in the cold, stretching straight into Cleveland like a ribbon laid over ice. I played soft Christmas music in the car to fill the silence, but it only made me more aware of how tense I felt. By the time I reached Pine Ridge Drive, the entire neighborhood looked like something from a holiday card. Every house was trimmed with lights, wreaths hung on every door, and children ran across lawns, their boots crunching the snow. My parents' house stood at the end of the street, proud and old, its porch wrapped with glowing garlands that hid the cracks in the wood. I parked by the curb and took a deep breath before stepping out. The cold stung my face, but it grounded me. I wasn't a little girl coming home for approval anymore. I was the woman who had been quietly paying their bills for nearly 2 years. Inside, the warmth hit me like a wall. Music, laughter, the smell of baked ham and cinnamon candles. The living room was crowded with people I barely recognized, old church friends, my father's golf buddies, and a few distant relatives who only appeared for events that involved free food and gossip. My mother, Patricia, stood by the tree, perfectly dressed in emerald green, her lipstick flawless. She looked radiant to everyone else. To me, she looked tired beneath the makeup. "Avery," she exclaimed, opening her arms just enough for a polite hug. Her perfume, something floral and sharp, filled my lungs. "You made it. We weren't sure you'd come, with how busy you always are." I smiled politely. I wouldn't miss it. Across the room, my father, Henry, stood by the punch bowl, animated as always, telling one of his long stories about success and sacrifice. His voice carried easily, deep and commanding, the kind of tone that made people laugh at all the right spots. When he noticed me, his expression didn't change. No smile, no welcome, just a short nod before he returned to his story. Then came Lila. She floated down the stairs like the house itself was her stage. Her red satin dress caught the light, her hair curled perfectly, and that ever-familiar scent of her expensive perfume reached me before she did. "Look who decided to show up," she said with that smile people mistook for kindness. She leaned in for a hug, her arms barely touching me. I felt her phone pressed between us, still warm, probably fresh from a message she didn't want me to see. "She made it, everyone," she announced to the room, her voice honey-sweet but dripping with something else underneath. A few people clapped, others chuckled, like my presence was a surprise performance. I swallowed the bitterness that rose in my throat. "Merry Christmas, Lila." She tilted her head, her earrings glinting. "Merry Christmas, Avery. I hope the drive wasn't too hard. It must be tough balancing work and, well, everything else." I smiled tightly. "I manage." The evening dragged on in a blur of laughter and shallow conversations. My father's voice boomed above the crowd, my mother floated between guests, and Lila played the charming hostess, accepting compliments for things she hadn't done. I stood by the fireplace, invisible and watching. The room glowed with golden light, but I could feel the cracks underneath, the kind you only see if you've lived inside them long enough. When the carols ended and the guests began to settle into smaller groups, I decided to speak with my father. I approached him calmly, my plan rehearsed in my mind. I wasn't going to accuse or demand. I just wanted to tell him that I'd been covering the house bills, that it was time for them to take over again. "Dad," I said softly, "can we talk privately for a minute after this?" He turned slowly, a strange glint in his eyes. "What about?" "Just some family business," I replied. Something shifted in his face, something I didn't recognize at first. His lips tightened, and he looked past me to the people standing nearby. Then, suddenly, he stepped forward, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look," he said with a mocking laugh, "this greedy woman came to us with her mouth wide open." The room went silent. Every head turned. I froze, the words cutting through me like cold air. For a heartbeat, I thought he was joking, but then he raised his foot and kicked me in the shin, not hard enough to knock me down, but enough to sting. The sound of nervous laughter rippled through the crowd, followed by the deeper laughter of people who wanted to stay on his good side. My face burned. I tried to speak, to say anything that would break the humiliation, but he cut me off again. "Shut up and get out," he barked, his face flushed with alcohol and pride. I stood there, surrounded by people who looked away. My mother didn't move. Her hand rested on the punch ladle, her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Lila lifted her chin, as if the entire scene embarrassed her more than it hurt me. Grant, her smug boyfriend, smirked from across the room, enjoying the show. In that moment, I felt 15 again, the same old helplessness flooding back. I remembered another night in this same room, years ago, after I'd won a debate trophy. My father had told the neighbors that true success wasn't plaques or speeches. "Real success," he'd said, looking straight at me, "is knowing your place." This was my place, apparently. But not anymore. I turned away, my hands steady now, my heart strangely calm. The laughter behind me faded as I stepped out onto the porch. The cold air hit my face, sharp and clean, and for the first time that night, I could breathe. I sat on the top step, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. One by one, I canceled every autopay: gas, electric, water, internet, mortgage supplements, even the grocery account I'd quietly kept open under Lila's name. Then I called the oil company and removed my card from the account. It took less than 5 minutes to undo 18 months of sacrifice. When I stood up, snow was falling again, light and soft. I brushed it off my coat, fixed my scarf, and walked to my car. The engine started easily, the radio humming quietly as I pulled away. Behind me, the house on Pine Ridge glowed with warmth and laughter. But for once, I didn't feel left out. I felt free. And as I drove through the falling snow back toward Columbus, I realized something simple and final. I hadn't lost a family that night. I had stopped paying for one. The Monday after the Christmas party began quietly, with the kind of silence that feels too still to trust. The world outside my window was covered in white, the roads slick, the trees heavy with snow, and the city muffled beneath it all. Inside, my townhouse felt different too, as if the walls themselves knew something had shifted. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee growing cold and opened my laptop. The first thing I did was change every password linked to my bank accounts. Then I froze the emergency card my mother had used for the pharmacy and the grocery line I'd opened under Lila's name when she swore she'd pay me back. I watched the confirmation screens appear one by one, each click another small act of freedom. When I finished, I wrote a short, emotionless email addressed to my parents and Lila. "Effective today, I am no longer paying any of your bills. Please make your own arrangements. For clarity, I have covered $54,000 over the last 18 months. I wish you well." No explanations, no apology, no room for negotiation. I read it twice, then hit send. By noon, my phone started ringing. Unknown numbers, my parents' landline, Lila's cell, even her boyfriend's. I ignored everyone. By 2 o'clock, there were 47 missed calls. By 4, the count had crossed 100. My phone buzzed, so often it felt alive in my hand. I finally placed it face down and walked away. That night, I slept without checking a single message. For the first time in years, my mind didn't run through bills, balances, and deadlines. The peace felt strange, like silence after a storm, but it was peace all the same. The next morning, I did something I'd put off for too long. I met with a lawyer. Her name was Dana Reeves, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm presence. Her office overlooked the Scioto River, the kind of place where everything felt structured and safe. She listened without interrupting as I told her about the party, the kick, the laughter, and the months of hidden payments. When I finished, she folded her hands. "What happened at that party was assault," she said softly. "I don't want to fight over one kick," I told her. "I just want it to end. I want a boundary that stays in place." She nodded. "Then we'll make it legal." Dana drafted a cease and desist letter that prohibited them from using my accounts or contacting me for financial help. She also helped me prepare a certified statement listing every payment I'd made, dates, amounts, and vendors, so no one could twist the truth. And finally, she advised that I include a clause warning that any false accusations of theft or fraud would result in a defamation suit. Her flat fee was $900. I paid it right there, feeling lighter with every signature. By midweek, the fallout began. The gas company hung a bright orange final notice tag on their front door. The internet cut off during one of my father's online poker games, something he used to brag about hosting for his golf friends. I imagined the chaos that followed. Then Lila made her move. She posted a vague message online. "Some people bite the hand that feeds them. Family doesn't always mean loyalty." The post got over 200 likes and a handful of sympathetic comments from people who didn't know the truth. I scrolled through it once, then closed the app. I wasn't going to argue with lies anymore. That night, she called me. Her voice came through sharp, half angry and half desperate. "You did this on purpose," she snapped. "You wanted to humiliate us. You waited until Christmas to make it sting." "I didn't time anything," I said evenly. "The date was your choice. You chose it when you laughed." There was silence on the line, then a long sigh before she hung up. On Friday, my mother called from a neighbor's phone. Her voice cracked before she even said my name. "Avery, please. You've made your point. We can't manage without the payments. Your father is furious, and the bank." I stopped her gently. "I'm safe," I said. "And I'm not your wallet." The line went still. Then, through the faint static, she whispered, "Who's going to pay the mortgage shortfall?" "You will," I said. "Or the bank will own your story." I ended the call before she could respond. That weekend, I drove to Cleveland one last time. The roads were clear, the world washed clean by another layer of snow. I didn't go inside the house. Instead, I left a brown box on the porch, sealed neatly with tape. Inside was a binder labeled proof of payment. Each tab held receipts, statements, and a breakdown of every dollar I had spent: mortgage top-ups, oil refills, utility bills, credit balances, everything. I also included a letter outlining a repayment plan if they ever decided to make amends. No interest, no penalty, no shame. Just accountability. For Lila, I left a separate envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one sentence: "I will not carry your halo." As I turned to leave, a gust of wind sent snow swirling around the porch steps. The house stood behind me, tall and cold, its lights still glowing. It looked like a ship that had sailed past every lighthouse and chosen to drift anyway. I paused by my car for a moment, looking back one last time. I had spent years trying to hold that house together, to keep their lives from collapsing. But the truth was, they never wanted to be saved. They just wanted control. When I slid into the driver's seat, I felt a strange mix of grief and freedom. My hands trembled on the wheel, not from fear but from release. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. The drive back to Columbus felt different this time. The snow reflected the headlights, The radio hummed softly, and for once, I didn't think about who might call or what bill might come due next. I thought about my own life, my own home, and the quiet future waiting for me. Behind me, the house on Pine Ridge was no longer my responsibility. It would stand or fall on its own. I had given enough, too much, maybe. But now, the story was theirs to live with. And as the miles stretched out beneath me, I whispered into the empty car, "Let them learn what it costs to laugh." January settled over Columbus like a gray quilt, thick, cold, and quiet. The holidays were behind me, but their echoes lingered in small ways. The unopened voicemails, the texts left unread, the absence of obligation humming softly in the air. My townhouse felt different now, lighter, more my own. I no longer woke in the middle of the night, wondering if a payment had gone through or if another late fee would appear. For the first time in years, I slept through till morning without that weight on my chest. I filled my days with calm rituals that didn't demand anything of me. Morning coffee brewed in silence. Long walks along the Scioto River, where the frozen water looked like silver glass. I started cooking again, simple meals like soup and roasted vegetables, and even began keeping a vase of fresh flowers on the kitchen counter. Every Sunday, I bought a small bouquet, never expensive, but always bright enough to remind me that beauty didn't have to come from anyone else's approval. When friends asked how I was doing, I told them the truth. "Light," I said. "And clean." Like my life finally caught its breath. They didn't always understand, but I didn't need them to. I was no longer explaining my piece. The calls from my family came less often. At first, it was every hour, then every day, then every few days. One voicemail from my father lingered on my phone longer than the rest. His voice, stern and cold as ever, said, "This is your duty, Avery. Families don't keep score. Only cowards keep receipts." I listened once, saved it for a week, then deleted it, and went for a run in the cold morning air. The wind against my face felt like erasing something that had been written too long ago. By March, I received a letter from the Cleveland bank addressed to me by mistake. It stated that my parents were behind on their mortgage. I stared at the envelope for a while, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't mine to fix anymore. A few days later, Lila called and left a long voicemail that began with tears and ended with blame. She said they didn't deserve what I'd done, that I'd embarrassed them, that people were talking. Her voice cracked halfway through when she said, "Dad's not himself." But the truth was, he had always been himself. I had just stopped cushioning the consequences. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the repayment plan I'd left on the porch weeks earlier. No message, no emotion, just a quiet reminder that I'd already done my part. 2 weeks later, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a money order for $500 with no note. The next week, another arrived for $500, then one for $750. It didn't make a dent in the total, but it meant something far greater. It was the first honest act my family had ever made toward me. I tucked each stub into a small box in my closet and refused to let the numbers define my peace. Spring came slowly that year. The river thawed, the air softened, and I began to notice how alive Columbus felt when the cold lifted. I planted herbs on my balcony, basil, rosemary, and mint, and started biking to work on a second-hand bicycle I bought for $120 from a man named Charles, who sold old frames out of his garage. Every small thing I did for myself felt like a declaration. I'm still here, and I'm mine. When my annual bonus arrived in April, I set aside $2,000 in a savings account labeled Home Fund. It was the first time I'd ever saved for something that was purely for me, not for the family house, not for someone else's debt, just for a dream that carried my name alone. I spent weekends looking through listings in German Village and in a small, tree-lined neighborhood near Schiller Park. I wasn't looking for luxury. I wanted something small and steady, a home with soft rugs, a sturdy kettle, and a table where kindness could sit without tension. On the first warm Saturday in May, I drove back to Cleveland for the first time since that night. The trip wasn't planned. I just wanted to see the house one last time without anger clinging to me. I parked across the street and watched in silence. The house still stood tall, wrapped in its white siding and black shutters, the porch curling around it like a memory. The yard looked different, tidier, perhaps from effort, perhaps from guilt. My mother sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket, her hair grayer than before. She looked smaller somehow, like the house had outgrown her. She saw me, raised a hand halfway, then let it fall. I nodded once. That was all. I didn't need words. Some stories end not with forgiveness, but with peace. When I drove away, I didn't cry. I felt something close to gratitude, not for what they'd done, but for what they'd taught me. To survive without their approval, to define worth without applause. The summer that followed became the best one of my life. I spent evenings by the river with friends, rode my bike through city streets that now felt like mine, and laughed more than I had in years. I didn't need grand happiness, just quiet, consistent contentment. In July, I found it, a small blue house on the edge of Columbus with white trim, an old oak tree in the yard, and a porch just big enough for 2 chairs. It was listed at $265,000. Manageable, steady, honest. I made an offer, signed the papers, and moved in 2 weeks later. On move-in night, I unpacked slowly, setting my books on the shelf, my mug in the cabinet, my life in place, piece by piece. I named the Wi-Fi Grace. It felt fitting. Dinner that night was simple: pasta, salad, and a glass of wine. I ate at the table by the window with the city humming outside and a soft summer breeze drifting in. I didn't post about it. I didn't send a photo to anyone. This moment was mine, quiet and real. When I lay in bed that night, the house creaked gently around me. It wasn't silence anymore. It was peace filling the space where pain used to live. Some nights now, when I think back to that Christmas, I can still hear the echo of laughter in that crowded living room. But it doesn't sting anymore. It passes through me like distant thunder, and then it's gone. I am not the greedy woman they mocked. I am not the invisible daughter who bought their comfort. I am the woman who finally learned that love without respect is a debt with no end. My life belongs to me now, and every bill, every brick, every quiet moment of freedom is paid for in full.